Welcome, everyone, to episode 33 of the Treatment Room Secrets podcast. We're here in St. Augustine. It's the one that's difficult for me to pronounce. I hope, am I pronouncing
Yes.
St. Augustine?
Yes.
I guess it's not the original pronunciation. It is one of the oldest, or the oldest
It is
city?
the oldest city in the U.S.
Okay,
If you don't count the Native American Indians, of course. It was
yeah.
founded in 1565.
Yeah, or I guess they didn't have cities. Was it the Spanish that built
Yes,
here a city?
correct.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So I'm here, the voice of Dr. Sharon Fair. So good to see you. So good to again meet you in person. I know we've been exchanging emails and talking mainly originally because of your book that's sitting here on the desk, which seems like a decent piece of work. So we're here in St. Augustine, and I know that there's a lot you want to share, a lot that you maybe on your mission that you fight for, and I'd love to talk about it. But I just because it's here, like it's right in my face. When did you publish this book? And what was your mission behind it? Because that's the reason I found you, is because I reached out to you because the title of the book was very appealing to me. It's very intact with what we do at Neil Asher Education at NAT Global Campus. So it's Wellness and Holistic Physical Therapy, third edition, if I'm seeing correctly.
Correct.
So how did that start, and what was your mission behind that?
I taught at the University of St. Augustine for Health Sciences here in St. Augustine, which is probably the largest physical therapy program in the U.S., and I should think then the world.
Wow.
And I taught their wellness course. I was on faculty for about 10 years, and I taught their wellness course. And during that time, of course, I accumulated a lot of written information to give to the students. So somehow someone found me, a publisher, Jones and Bartlett, and asked if I would be willing to write a wellness textbook to be part of their series that they then market to physical therapy programs. So that first edition was published in 2009, and I decided more recently, within the last couple years, to self-publish. So I had a second edition a couple years ago, and now the third edition this year.
Which was self-published?
Correct.
Yeah. And
Correct.
was that during COVID days, the second and third edition that you worked on?
Yes, although that wasn't the reason. But I do want to mention the reason that I decided to self-publish is because now I own my work. I didn't realize when you have your book published through a publisher, they own it. So if you use anything that you wrote, you have to reference yourself from your textbook to be totally ethical and
so
legal.
How does that work if they publish the first edition? And because I'm assuming the second and third is maybe re-edited or added information, but consists of a lot of the same stuff?
Well, I actually had to start from the scratch. So I didn't even look at my first edition before I started to write the second, because I have so much knowledge in my head.
Yeah.
Number one, I didn't really need to, but number two, I didn't want to commit plagiarism.
Yeah.
Now,
without quoting yourself, without referencing yourself.
Right. And there are some areas that I referenced myself.
Yeah. So what was for you in terms of, because I'm assuming it's a lot of work, especially as it's something you've, let's say, written before with the publishers. What drove you to spend the time and dedicate yourself to doing it second and third time? Because I always hear how difficult it is to put something like this together. And that seems like a hell of a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 400 pages, 1,200 references. It is a lot more than, I've thought when I first entered into it. But, once you start, you don't want to quit. And then once you have your various chapters, your template, of course, you kind of change those around to come up with the best structure of it. But I enjoy writing. I've always loved to write. So to me, it wasn't a chore because I simply enjoy the act of writing so much.
And so is it really written from in your words, how you see things?
Correct. Yes. It's actually in first person.
I see. And the book itself, does it fit the physical therapy curriculum? For example, here in is it University of St. Augustine?
Correct.
So does it fit? Because just the terms holistic and overall wellness, again, just intuitively is not something that I immediately associate with the typical physical therapy curriculum.
The CAPTI, which is the accrediting body of physical therapy programs, require the program to teach certain components. And many of those are actually, they use the term prevention, health promotion, wellness, and those may be picked up in a course here or there.
Yeah.
But this textbook was specifically written to meet all of the wellness-related components that are required by CAPTI for the accreditation.
Can we break down a couple of them, or like maybe the main ones in your perspective in terms of like wellness topics that physical therapists should be aware of, should know as they're, getting on with their schooling?
I would say a couple of the areas are, number one, nutrition and diet, because that's often a somewhat underemphasized subject matter in physical therapy schools, and we should definitely have a solid understanding of nutrition, because nutrition affects the ability of a person to engage in and benefit from physical therapy. And also, a lot of patients will ask us questions about nutrition. They'll ask us about fad diets. And I'm aware of some physical therapists who support fad diets and unknowingly educate or confirm patients to follow a diet that is not an appropriate diet. So that's all. And I'm.
And why do you think that is? Why do you think that we lack maybe in that part of wellness education when it comes to nutrition?
I think it's because the physical therapy programs, there is so much else to learn that's absolutely required. Nutrition is more of a fringe topic, so to speak. So some programs will integrate more nutrition than others. And of course, if they utilize a textbook such as mine, they get a very solid, comprehensive knowledge base.
Yeah, very interesting. So what's the, you mentioned number one, so nutrition, number two?
It has to do with mental health and the psychological aspects of a patient of providing physical therapy from different areas. For example, the mental illness comorbidities with which a patient very often presents, whether it's anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, in some cases bipolar. I even had a couple patients that were agoraphobic, and I worked in home health care.
What is that? Agoraphobic?
Correct.
What is
it's
that?
A fear of leaving the home, of getting outside. And my setting was in home health. So, of course, a major goal of mine was to get the patient out of the bed if they're in bed, out of the bedroom if they're confined to the bedroom, out of the house, to be able to walk in their yard or walk in their garden and so forth. So there are a lot of mental illness comorbidities that the average physical therapy program would not emphasize that this can really impact physical therapy.
Yeah. Also, because I always, even with myself, I notice, and I like to think I'm fairly active, definitely been active my entire life, that connection between mental well-being or mental health with your physical performance, abilities, even sometimes like just on bad sluggish days.
Right.
Your joints even might feel a bit off that day.
Right. So one doesn't need to meet the threshold to be diagnosed with a mental disorder with, the ICD-10 code. They may not meet that threshold, but they're still presenting as stressed out, as anxious, as aggressive, as non-compliant. So there can be a lot of issues that are more mentally based that can really impede, adversely affect one's, as I say again, I use this phrase a lot, to participate in or benefit from physical therapy.
So I, throughout the month of, now we're September, so that throughout the month of August, I, for the first time, I went through an intermittent fasting trial period for 30 days, give or take. And again,
Why did you do that?
Why? Why? It started by accident.
Okay.
It started by accident. I just I skipped lunch a couple times. Again, I don't know if you agree with any of this. It's just me experimenting with my body. I feel good. In general, I feel good. But I stopped eating breakfast, I think 4 or 5 years ago now. And I've kind of stuck religiously with that just because, again, I feel better, especially if I compare to what I felt before. And then I skipped lunch a couple times. Again, even to myself, thinking that's something a bit crazy to do because besides the breakfast, I would skip breakfast, but be very religious with eating lunch at 1 p.m., 1:30 p.m. Always eat lunch and then eat dinner again, 7, 8 p.m. I skipped lunch a couple times and I realized that I was hungry. I was hungry.
Well, of course you would be.
I was hungry, but I felt way more efficient. I guess this is tied to the second point, which is I felt more focused. And the reason I bring this up is because the psychological aspect of it is after that second day that I skipped lunch kind of accidentally, the third day I thought, okay, might as well ride this wave and let's do 30 days. Also, my girlfriend who's sitting back there, she started some challenge also around the same time. So, I jumped on that bandwagon as well for myself, and I did it. And by the third, fourth, fifth day, again, I wasn't hungry. I wasn't thinking about lunch. And the psychological element came in for me that I noticed, at least for myself, is just not having that lunch barrier in the middle of my day, that whatever I'm doing, whoever I'm speaking to, I have to stop and dedicate the next 20 minutes, 1 hour, whatever, however long it takes, to eat lunch. So that's one. Number two is getting over that psychological battle of continuing your momentum from before lunch after you've eaten lunch. And I would assume the first question you want to ask me is, what the hell are you eating for lunch?
Well, that would be one question that I have. The other question is, because I see you have coffee there. When you went on your fast, were you still drinking coffee?
Guilty.
Okay. The
Guilty.
caffeine, of course you.
I should have said that.
That isn't a fast.
Coffee addict.
That isn't a
Fair
fast
enough.
because you're getting caffeine, and I don't know if you're getting sugar in it or not either. But
yeah, not a lot, but yes, absolutely. So my version of intermittent fasting. But the psychological, for me at least, psychological benefit that I felt was removing that thing that's stuck in the middle of my day permanently that I have to eat because I'm hungry, because I worked out, because I just have to eat at that time. But this month taught me that maybe I don't have to be that strict. Like maybe I can eat a snack at 4 or 5 p.m. rather than having a meal at 1 p.m. That kind of disorients my focus or momentum that day that I've been building. So you mentioned like 1 and 2, nutrition and mental health, but they could even be tied themselves. Maybe people that are eating.
you mean linked?
Linked, yeah.
Oh, they 100%
Right,
are.
like I can imagine someone, who's stopping by a drive-through every day to get something fast food, also being an aggressive person. I don't know if it's because of it, but it kind of seems like it goes together. Is there a third that goes with those that you think, like a major key, like a key point that in the umbrella term of wellness that physical therapists maybe
I would say
don't spend that much time on?
So we're not going to get back to your fasting.
We can continue. We can continue. What other questions?
Okay,
what other questions?
I just want to.
But is it surprising what I'm saying though?
Yes, it is. But you could be more of an anomaly rather than the rule. You're also younger, which makes your body better able to tolerate not fasting. Because when you've gone 8 hours sleeping a night, right there, you're waking up and your blood sugar is lower.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that people feel hungry, because their body doesn't have the calories, especially the carbohydrate stores, because those are used up. So what I just like to add is I wouldn't recommend that as a global, this is a good thing to do. I'm glad it worked out for you, especially mentally. But I wouldn't recommend it. And I like to share the adage, breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
That's what I've always been told.
Okay.
No, look, I also think part of the problem for me, and again, I'm just experimenting, but is that my breakfast for most of my life was just bad. I ate breakfast every day, but it was bad. So maybe I just never really...
what were you choosing to eat for breakfast?
Cereal. As a kid.
Okay, were you eating like a high well, that yes,
Cocoa Puffs, all that
that's
stuff.
Completely different then.
So I guess I maybe so that's what I'm comparing no breakfast to
a junk breakfast.
A junk breakfast. So I don't really have the comparison to compare it to a good breakfast yet. Yeah. Maybe that's something I'll explore.
Well, try it. Try it for 30 days. Eating a healthy breakfast.
I will. But that definitely was a learning experience for me. Also about my body, I know you're saying I'm young, maybe more adaptable, but I liked how adaptable I felt. Also, everything like that I've tried, I noticed that day one is very difficult to change the routine that your body is used to when it comes to nutrition. Day two is difficult. Day three is kind of difficult, and then kind of like get used to whatever it is stuck on for those few days, 30 days, whatever it is. I guess that also there's that challenge of trying to find the right fit for me or the general rule and stick with it long term. I don't know if I want to do my fake version of intermittent fasting forever. I did it for 30 days and I ended it a few days ago.
Okay. And also keep in mind that the human body, over millions and millions of years, our bodies have had to adapt to long periods of time without food. Otherwise, we would be the first ones to be picked off by the animals and be killed. So that is something that, fortunately, throughout the millions and millions of years, we have. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we should be.
Yeah. And you said you were lucky. I don't know if it was on air or before we started recording, but that you never really surround yourself with bad food or bad drinks. Even as a kid, wouldn't you? Gum?
Correct.
Was that live? Did you say that on the podcast? Or was that before?
It was prior to the podcast starting.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, very fortunate that I just did not like the taste of those foods.
Yeah, was it the taste?
Yeah, I literally, when my mom would prepare steak for dinner, I would literally hide it in my napkin and throw it away. I just never liked the taste of it. I never liked soda. I never really got into gum. Coffee.
Is it parental influence, though?
No, not really, because my sister doesn't have the best eating habits. So I don't know why.
You never could point a finger to like kind of what
not in my childhood, no. Now, when I was probably about 18, 19, I started to think more about, I am going to choose this healthier option versus a not so healthy option. But
just educated
yes,
choices.
Correct, right. Relatively early on.
And so what led you... I'll take a step back. Did it intrigue you that... all of maybe everyone your age, your sister, are all, want to drink Coke, they want to eat McDonald's, they want to chew chewing gum, and you didn't? Was it intriguing to you? Did you feel like you were weird? Did you feel like you were different? Did you force yourself to try those things, to try and like them, to be like everyone else?
I have to admit, when I was probably in 11th grade, I was dating a senior, and he had a car, so every day we were able to go out to lunch, and we went to a fast food restaurant, which I will not name because I don't want to promote them. And I had a big meat sandwich every day. And at the time, I had a nice young 17-year-old body, and I felt great with it. If I tried to do that now, I would have to run to the restroom.
Fair enough. And then, so there's a good portion of the book on nutrition.
I have two full chapters.
Yeah.
One is about the basics of nutrition, and the second chapter about the various diets, to include what's called the SAD diet, the Standard American Diet, which is what you probably followed before your fasting days, perhaps.
Influenced by, for sure.
Influence,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah, absolutely influenced by. But I've just been, for a few years now, I would say, I've been like, on this journey of just breaking all these like nutrition axioms that were set in my life just because, you just told things as a kid in school, at home, that all sound like they make sense. And I just kind of stuck with them in terms of not necessarily implementing for myself. I wasn't stuffing maybe enough greens into my mouth like I know I should have. But I also wasn't I wasn't afraid enough, or I wasn't cautious enough in terms of what I was putting in my body. I was aware that if I put good things, I will get benefits from it, but I wasn't aware enough that if I put bad things in my body, I will also see those effects. And a lot of those effects are very like invisible, right?
Yes.
It's hard for us to judge energy, and it's hard for us to judge mood and things like that.
And just think about the average youth. The average youth tends to think they're invincible.
Yep.
They can jump off buildings. They can do this, do that. They can push their body in different sports. And then it's not until they're 40, 60 years old that they feel the ramifications of their earlier habits, exercise habits, nutritional habits, alcohol habits, cigarette smoking, whatever it happens to be.
So this SAD diet. So what actually defines is there a definition to the SAD diet?
I think that's just a name that they came up with. Standard American diet just means heavy in meat, heavy in fat, a larger proportion of fat, not enough fiber, not enough fruits and vegetables, that sort of thing. Yeah.
They have this show now on Netflix, which I haven't seen yet, but I don't know if you've seen about these different communities around the world that have very long lives within those communities, and just breaking down their lifestyle, their communities, their nutrition as a key factor of it as well.
Actually, one of the diets that I talk about is the whole food, plant-based diet, and that's based off what was called the China diet. And the China diet, which is not the modern new version diet, but the ancient Chinese diet that the native Chinese people have been consuming for generations and hundreds of years. And that really was the precursor research of that traditional Chinese diet with the high vegetables, high fiber, and so forth, that I believe it was in the 1950s. They investigated that diet and compared it to the standard American diet. And that's when they found, wow, there's major differences in the incidence of coronary artery disease, hypertension, diabetes, just simply body weight, obesity. And they found some interesting findings, such as that if a person eats a healthier diet, they can actually consume more calories, but yet weigh less than if a person consumes the standard American diet high in fat.
Which sounds shocking to a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Which doesn't make sense because they speak to us always like in calories like it's mathematics.
And it's not. It's 100% not. And this is, for example, you have the woman. More women tend to be concerned about their weight, especially over a certain age, where they'll go on a diet and then they'll exercise. And the million-year-old body is thinking, okay, well, I'm being starved, and these animals are chasing me around. So to survive, their body had to adapt. And the basal metabolic rate would significantly slow. And so when women do that today, and I guess there are some men too, then they wonder, why aren't they losing weight when they're restricting their diet and they're going down to 1,200 calories, 800 calories, 600 calories, and they're going in the gym 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 60 minutes. And
every day.
Yes, every day. And it's because millions of years ago, we would have died. So those people whose body did not slow down, they died.
Yeah.
So we have good genes, so to speak, but we don't need them today.
So so is it when I think about obesity, and as soon as you say the word obesity, everyone points a finger at the United States of America. I think it's the numbers suggest it's getting worse in other countries around the world.
Yeah.
But the godfather of this is the United States. Is it because it's so hard for me to think that it's something like obesity, and it's sad to see, anywhere really you are in America, waiting in line, going to a movie, whatever it is, you're seeing it around you all the time. It almost seems like it's a hard thing to even get to. Like, even if one
to become obese,
to become obese, even like think to myself, like if I made it as a challenge to myself to be obese, it seems hard to get to that.
Well, part of that is nowadays a lot of people are starting to gain weight very early at young ages, 10, 15, 20, whereas in my generation, we were thin when we were young. We were average weight. We were outside playing tag. In the winter, we were ice skating. Children today are not doing that.
You have these videos too from like the 60s, 70s PE class in schools.
A little, just the significant difference in the PE class.
Everyone is like muscular and everyone is strong. Everyone's doing pull-ups and dips and jumping, and it's amazing to watch.
That's an aside, but it's a very interesting one, because when I was in gym class in the 70s, I'm that old, we had gymnastics, field hockey, track, tennis, archery. And we developed, I think, more of an interest in just leading a more active lifestyle and having hobbies that were more active rather than the primary pastime being playing video games.
Yeah.
You see, so we were out more now. Even when my daughter was in middle school, and she went right here in St. Augustine. Well, they no longer engage children in all those interesting and fun forms of physical activity. They put them outside. 40 kids at a time would be out there, and the kids would be either walking around the track, not jogging, walking, chatting. Yeah. And some of the boys would be playing like touch football or something. And that's the gym class now.
Yeah. It's
So you would have the boys who were more interested in sports, who were getting some exercise because fortunately, they had the interest in sports, but there were really no girls, which we can get to later on because
it's on my list.
Biologically they couldn't have competed against them.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's what. So we mentioned a few examples of like where wellness comes in, and how and why it should be taught in physical therapy curriculums. The holistic, you threw in like the wellness and holistic in there. Is that something that's maybe lacking in a standard curriculum, looking at things holistically? Like what point are you trying to make with the title of the book, and where does that come into the book itself?
Well, I think that's an umbrella term for, let's say, nutrition, mental health, some of these what are considered fringe areas in the regular physical therapy curriculum, because the curriculum has so many intensive courses. It's a very rigorous program.
Yeah, was it 4 years?
Well, now it's a doctorate program, so one must have at least 3 years to get into a physical therapy program, just like medical school. For medical school, you need 3 years, although most have 4. And most students who enter a physical therapy program have a bachelor's in exercise physiology, whatever the case might be. But it is an entry-level doctoral program now.
So you were saying about the curriculum.
So, it really is difficult to fit in these what are considered fringe areas. I don't consider them to be fringe areas. For example, I used to teach a gerontology class, which is considered a fringe area because, the primary thing in a lot of physical therapy schools is like the model patient, like a 35-year-old male. It's not even the female, it's more of a male. So the common sense involved, well, when you establish a goal for 80 or 90-year-old patient, compared to the goal that you would have for a 20, 30, 40-year-old male or even female has got to be different. So that is a holistic component, just recognizing different ages of different patients.
Because human isn't human. Human is a million different variations.
Exactly. Exactly.
So how do you teach that? How do you?
Well, you can only, there's only a certain amount that you can teach. And that's why we say practice physical therapy.
Yeah.
That was my career, practicing because I was learning up until the time that I stopped practicing. After working in home care 20 years, I would go in to see a patient and there'd be something that I would learn from that patient, perhaps small, perhaps pretty large.
Have you faced any injuries yourself?
Yes, I have a herniated disc now, L4, L5. So,
is that something new?
It happened about a year and a half ago now. And actually, I cannot tolerate the seated posture very much. That happens to be, so I may have to take a break at some point.
Yeah, no worries. We can stand as well. We can stand. We can take a standing break.
Yeah, but it was, and it's because I didn't follow my own advice. And I'm 63, and I thought I was in my 40s still. And I was out doing hardcore manual labor, yard work, because I love yard work. Yeah. And I pushed my little body too much. So, I didn't listen to some of my advice.
I'm asking you in the context, though, like because you said that you learned every patient visit, you learned something. If like suffering injuries yourself has taught you or has helped you manage a certain patient. Because I'm always surprised by like when I tweak, even like nothing serious, but if I tweak a muscle that I maybe haven't hurt ever in my life, it's a huge learning experience. A huge learning experience. Suddenly you notice the function of that muscle, how you compensate if you cannot use that muscle, just the pain that it can generate is sometimes pretty impressive from areas that you weren't expecting. Like for example, now I have, which I self-diagnose, so sorry, but intercostal muscle.
Okay.
Something in the intercostal muscle, which is, I didn't even know that I could injure something in that region.
Did you begin a new exercise or new activity? Well, that's it.
I did.
Yeah, something to do with that.
I did. And it's, but just, but the sensation that it generates, the type of pain, the body like sends different signals depending, right, on the on the type of injury, how gruesome the injury was.
Correct. And one of the things people don't realize is that pain is a signal that something is wrong. And sometimes you need to work through the pain. For example, I had a shoulder surgery and I knew what I had to do. After I was given the okay by my surgeon, I had to forcibly stretch into shoulder flexion, which normally you would have a physical therapist do it. Yeah. And it made me cry, but I knew I had to do it. But there are many times and even many cases in physical therapy that you should not be causing your patient pain. And for example, there are a lot of young men, to be sexist, who are in great shape and they cause their patients, especially 70, 80, women, pain, and they shouldn't. And sometimes they actually injure the patient because of it.
So things do need to be adapted.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
From scratch, the moment someone, whoever they are, whatever shape they are, walk through the door, needs to be somewhat tailored to that person. Psychology. So you're a doctor of psychology as well?
Yes, correct. I do not have a license, though. I do not practice it per se. I just obtain the degree to benefit me in providing physical therapy to my patients.
Interesting. So that's why you went down that route in order to really supplement your physical therapy practice.
Correct. And also it's a personal benefit.
Yeah, of course. So where did the biggest benefit come, in your opinion, in terms of helping your practice as a physical therapist? Is it like maybe learning a bit more about the different like mental health categories that we mentioned under wellness in your book? So was it just understanding another component within your patients better?
Yeah. Yeah.
And did that open your eyes to maybe some things that you were not exposed to in your education, in
Oh,
your form of
definitely.
education that you maybe wish or?
Oh, yes, of course. Although, of course, you couldn't, have the coursework to earn a psychology doctorate degree.
course.
You couldn't fit that all in physical therapy curriculum.
Yeah.
But you should at least have some of the basics and develop an appreciation. And a lot of what physical therapy is, as I mentioned with practicing, is that when you are referred a patient, if there's something going on with that patient that you're not really confident about, you look it up. And now today we have the internet. So I would go to the internet and I would learn, and I wouldn't look at, yellow journalistic online stuff, but actual research that has been published in different areas, let's say. And that's something that we should do. And we're also required to take 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years when we renew our license.
Yeah.
So we're able to expand our knowledge base there.
And in the psychology part, you said, what was is there a specific personal benefit that came to you?
Yes, I have a diagnosed mental illness, so I learned about it.
Was that, and did you know about it before stepping into this field?
Let me see how old I was. I had been told that I had it, and I was in denial, which a lot of people who are diagnosed with a mental illness don't want to know. They don't know what they're talking about. I'm not going back in because of the stigma. And that's something else that I talk about in my book. The stigma that's associated with mental illness that prevents a lot of people with mental illness from sharing it, whether it's patients with their practitioner. There are also a lot of practitioners that do not share it because they don't want the stigma. And of course, they can be discriminated against, which I have, especially in some of the highest professions, such as medical doctors.
Yeah.
They really keep it tight. Yeah.
And is it something you said you've been discriminated against?
Yes.
So are you something you're vocal about and just open book about?
Yeah, actually, I was actually let go because of it, because I had requested ADA accommodations, and I was granted them. It was very difficult working with them. And when they had a downturn in their business, which physical therapy goes through cycles, I was cut, although I had the second most seniority. And there was a fellow who had been hired who had been a PT for about a year. It was very clear that they discriminated against me. And there was a lawsuit, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you speaking about it, you writing about it, things like that, have you seen people maybe come out, be more open, even if it's privately to you, about who they are, or maybe investigating more their different, maybe health status mentally? Mm-hmm. Has it caused more people to ask more questions about themselves and come out about it more? Because it's also a very because you're saying it from the perspective also like you have something and it's could be maybe dangerous to come out with because of the stigma and because of different things associated with it. You don't want patients not to see you because you have a mental condition. I don't know. You don't want it to affect your licensing or different things, or your workplace. But it's very like the mental health and the mental stigma is also popular right now, and I'm sure from the perspective of almost, quote unquote, everyone saying they have something, or everyone being proud of having something.
Yeah, it actually is almost a thing now.
It is a thing. It is a thing.
It is a thing. I know.
Athletes get, if an athlete comes out in, I'm a soccer fan, football fan. Mm-hmm. If an athlete in England will come out as, again, suffering from fill in the blank, a mental health problem, they only get celebrated. Mm-hmm. Which is a lovely thing because at least there's no stigma involved. There's even advantage, if you will, to an extent.
That's interesting. That certainly happened after I was practicing.
Yeah. And again, this is the world of celebrities, right. And athletes, not
Right, yeah.
someone who's working for on a daily
Right.
basis for a living and trying to maintain their job and trying to get patients coming in and
Right. Like the one movie, Silver Linings Playbook, with, that was an in thing for a while.
Bradley Cooper.
Yes. And then people became more, oh, well, that's kind of cool. But, obviously with the knowledge I had, they got a lot of things wrong in it. And so but it was good at least that people started talking about it more.
Yeah. And there's also, I guess, more stigma also in your world, as in people expect maybe their PT
They
or their
expect
doctor
their
to
healthcare professional to be perfect.
be perfect. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Especially now, for some reason, they seem to be a little bit more understanding if they're out of shape. And by that, I mean in the obesity category, they seem to be a little bit.
That's interesting.
Yeah, a little bit more flexible with that. But mental illness still seems to be. And what's interesting about that is that obesity is typically brought on by the person through poor diet and exercise, whereas a mental illness, in most cases, it's genetic. So it's not because a person, sought out to have the mental.
So in most cases, is it genetic? Is that what we know right now?
Well, there's many people are more vulnerable to developing.
Genetically more vulnerable.
Correct, right. Yeah. And some people, right, there's such a high genetic component, it's almost inevitable that they're going to present signs and symptoms. But the issue with that is because it's a rather taboo topic, a lot of people self-medicate. And typically that's with alcohol or drugs, street drugs. So a lot of the people who are alcoholics or even abuse drugs, they have an underlying mental illness. And they've not addressed the mental illness.
Because it's almost like put on idle mode, the mental illness.
Correct, yeah.
You said in the beginning that there's certain thresholds to be diagnosed with these different terms. How do they come up with thresholds? So, for example, even there's something like depression or anxiety. Do they have thresholds? So how do we quantify it?
There's a manual. It's published by the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, and they have all the mental diagnoses there, and all the criteria are laid out, and they're fairly complex in the criteria. One must present with 5 of these 8 signs or symptoms for more than a 2-week period of time or more than a 6-month period of time. It varies. For example, if you have a loved one die, it's very normal to go through a grieving period after that death. Yeah. But if the depression goes beyond 6 months, that's the criteria that is used. That, well, this is really now gone out of the grieving, which is normal, to a mental illness diagnosis.
And that passing a threshold qualifies you to receive certain treatments, medications?
It would be required for a medical doctor to prescribe a medication, for sure, and for the insurance company to pay for that. But what is better is if when a person is in the sub-threshold, they haven't reached the threshold yet, let's say, is to be open enough, be talking about mental health enough where that person is seeking treatment then, even if that treatment is simply having a healthier diet or exercise. Exercise helps with depression, for example, significantly.
Do you think that being diagnosed with something, for the people that have met these thresholds, almost can box someone as being anxious forever or as being depressed forever? Because like you said about someone dying, it's very common for someone to be in a depressed state of mind for a few weeks. So maybe in those few weeks or months, they were not taking, good care of themselves. So it's been prolonged. Now it's because it's been prolonged, they now have the label, the diagnosis of having depression. Because they have that label, now they're medicated. Because they're medicated, they get their prescription refilled. Do you think that we could see people boxed in these categories simply because of those labels?
Well, number one, there are some mental illness medical diagnoses which absolutely require the person to be medicated with psychotropic meds. And they should be, and that's just a fact of life. And so those people, though, can supplement with exercise and proper diet, getting enough sleep, avoiding alcohol and drugs, avoiding certain types of people. So perhaps they may be able to change the medication, reduce the dosage, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But there are people who, when they do adopt, and for example, if a person has hypertension and they make changes in their lifestyle, if they've been prescribed a medication, perhaps they can be weaned from that. The problem in the medical community today tends to be if someone comes in, the doctors don't first line of defense talk about a healthy lifestyle. They tend to prescribe medications. Now, sometimes with mental health and sometimes even with a more physical health problem, that does need to be done. But I should think not nearly as much as it is being done.
And you're a mother. You said you have a daughter?
Yes.
You said one daughter?
Just one. Mm-hmm.
I read on your website about the Mama Papa Bear,
Mama and Papa Bears.
Mama and Papa Bears,
Yes.
Which I'll ask you about. And also you sent me a few weeks ago the YouTube video of you speaking, I think with is it your garden in the back? Is it your backyard?
The lake.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
I live on a lake. Very
Beautiful.
fortunate. Yeah, it is.
Really beautiful. Yeah. So do you mind explaining what this is, the Mama Papa Bear? What is it, Mama Papa Bears?
Yes, Mama and Papa
Mama
Bears.
and Papa Bears. So do you mind explaining what it is and what your mission is behind it? And also, we'll take it from there. So so what is it and what do you hope to achieve with it?
Okay. It's a very controversial topic, as like a warning.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, And again, we knew we'd be talking about this coming in, but it is controversial. But let's, because for me, I want to approach it from the perspective of from a non-judgmental perspective, from a non-political, which is very politicized, right?
That is very important.
So non-political, no agenda here. We just you know about this way more than me. So let's learn. For me, I want to learn with you.
What our goal is to educate others in the biological reality of the sexes. And there is 50 years ago, sex and gender were synonymous. The noun sex was simply avoided because people would think of the verb sex, especially men.
Kids, boys giggle
children.
when they see it.
Yeah. So, we tended to use the noun, or we began to use the noun gender more. And actually, it was in the Supreme Court where one of the justices wanted to maintain that sex and gender were synonyms, and then the other, and I can't remember the name offhand, but it's in my website, that the male justice wanted to more define the term as gender are the male characteristics or feminine characteristics. And then since that time, it's gone even to the next step where sex and gender are not synonymous anymore.
So it used to be
synonymous.
Technically synonymous.
100%.
And now it's technically not synonymous?
Well, for me it is.
Okay.
For me it is. But for many people who say that gender is a social construct, that gender is different than sex. But the word gender, in my opinion, has been hijacked and redefined, and now it's used as the one of the pillars of why the gender ideology, why they purport that it's based in fact.
there's always like the first question that comes to my mind. So who's they? You think
Oh,
like
okay.
the movement behind it, even
Okay.
like even in the Supreme
Okay.
Court, them discussing whether this whether it's going to be synonymous or not. Like, why is this happening? Who put that pressure then on the Supreme Court justices?
Well, it started. You've probably heard of the term cross-dresser, right?
Yes.
Okay. Back in 1910 or whatever, cross-dressers, transvestites, and transsexuals, the difference being one is wearing of the opposite sex clothing. Most of the time it's a men wearing women's clothing. When a woman wore the man's clothing, it was more often to get a certain job, to serve in the military, that sort of thing. So it's typically men that we're talking about. So transvestite and transsexualism were, and still are actually, mental illness diagnoses. And there were some very wealthy transsexuals. Am I allowed to mention their names?
I think so. I don't see why. Yeah, worst case we'll remove it, but I think it's fine. So very well, yeah. So
yeah, there were very wealthy transsexuals, and one was an attorney, and of course now the names are going to escape me. Phyllis, and they all have female names. They're all biological men, and they became transsexuals through feminization surgery, castration, that sort of thing.
And when are we talking? Like how long ago?
This would have been more, well, it started as early as the 1910, 1920s, but then it really started to grow a lot more in the 60s. And in 1994, the first official conference, and it was by FRY, I believe it's FYRE, was held as continuing education course for attorneys. It was held in Texas, but of course you can take CEU courses, just like a physical therapist does or medical doctor does. You can go to a different state. And so they were wealthy, powerful transsexuals who wanted to promote transsexualism as normal because they, bottom line, want to be able to walk into a woman's restroom and not be looked at. And if there are a whole bunch of transgender people around, and they actually changed the term from transvestite and transsexual to transgender, so it doesn't have the strong sex connotation, and it's more palatable to society. And it's a new term, so they kind of push off to the side, the old terms. But a lot of these men wanted to be perceived as a woman. So one of the ways to do that is for a lot of other men to be accepted as transgender. For example, the one Pritzker. They're an extremely wealthy family. The one man is the governor of Illinois, and I don't remember if it's brother or his cousin, is transgender, transsexual, transvestite, I'm not sure. So they've dumped millions and millions of dollars into medical schools and this and that and medical centers. And aside from getting all that money, which hospitals and medical schools like, the gender-affirming care, my hands are quotation, that's extremely profitable, hugely profitable. And now they've brought in young girls, which is how I first heard about the movement, because my daughter was a tomboy. And back then, you had a tomboy. She wanted to dress in boys' clothing, play with boys. Okay, but she's a girl. Today, if you have a young girl expressing any symptoms at all, for example, being a tomboy, they're automatically somewhat, well, maybe you're a boy. Maybe you're a boy. And it kind of goes back to what you had said about mental illness. It can be a popular thing. Well, if a child is off to the side and they're not very popular, but now they come out as transgender, they're very popular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I said this to one of my parents very recently. I have no doubt that, again, if I was 9 years old now, or 11 years old, when you have my first sex education class, if the sex education class was already mind-blowing and, you know, all this information, all this giggly nonsense and all these funny things and all this like information that they're feeding to a kid that doesn't really understand what's the purpose of this. But if it was any more complicated than what it is, you know, like here's the function of a man, here's the function of a woman, and move on with your lives. Again, which I don't think is good, like like how superficial the education on it is. Maybe it's an age thing. I'm not here to solve the sexual education problem, but what I do know is that if at that age they threw into the mix all these options of how to have sex, when to have sex, with who to have sex, how you present yourself,
and what sex you think that you are by using the word gender.
Yeah, because when you're 10, you're 11,
it's a very vulnerable period.
And you're not straight yet because you've never had sexual relations with anyone. So they're throwing into the mix things before you even got the chance to be who you are, and they're already confusing. So I can see how kids nowadays, especially in America or places like America, it can be very confusing. And then like you maybe experience, maybe girls or boys coming home with questions to their parents that maybe doesn't necessarily correlate with what the teacher is saying or what the counselor at school is saying or the psychologist at school is saying, which creates even more confusion for the kid.
And part of the problem is in a lot of states, about half the states in the U.S., there can be social media and social pressure and friends and so forth that they're talking about the word transgender. And now typically, as I mentioned, the young girls are the victims at the younger age, where they hear the word transgender and they say, yes, I am a boy. And, you know, they start using the male pronouns and adopt a male name, and the teachers are not required to notify the parents. So a lot of times parents aren't even aware until the child is well into really thinking that they're the opposite sex. Again, mostly girls with boys. And they're to the point where then if their parents don't support them, then the child, and I hate to use the word cult, but I do believe it's a cult, that it's like a religion, then the girls are such that mindset where they rebel against the parents. The parents don't love me, the parents don't accept me, approve of me. And having that social contagion is very common with girls. It has always been common, and it is common now. Of course, when I was young, it might have been wearing makeup at a young age and hiding it from our parents, or wearing a sizzler. I used to wear a sizzler. I'd carry it in my backpack and wear it to school, and then, but girls, and, and then there are the unhealthy issues with social contagion with girls, such as cutting. One girl cuts, and then they all start to cut. You have the eating disorders with young girl. You have one or two young girls, and then pretty soon there's a high incidence of it. So that is the problem, too. Girls are very vulnerable.
And it spreads.
Yes, and it spreads. And girls are very vulnerable because some overdevelop. Some are underdeveloped. So it's very common for a young girl to have, a mild case of what you could say body dysmorphia. Yeah. They're not comfortable with their bodies. And transgenderism solves all of that.
So you're saying that, again, we've maybe been exposed to this in the mainstream culture for 10 years, 15 years? Mainstream, yes, at least?
I would say, I agree with that.
But it's been going on behind the scenes for over 100 years, you're saying, in terms of influence and money and powerful people behind it. So it's not something new. It's been building for a while.
Correct, right. And it really was 1994 when they had that first meeting in Texas of very powerful men really came together, and they set an agenda with goals. And they really lined up everything perfectly.
Is this documented, like this?
This meeting? It's actually public knowledge, and I actually have it on my website. It's all public. At this point in time, they're not hiding anything. Yeah. Everything's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But back then, was it
Well,
trying to be like a low key, underground movement?
No, I wouldn't say that. But it's just very few people who were attorneys who were not transsexual really cared about it and really would attend that type of seminar.
So, and just to make sure that I heard you correct, you said that so like, cross-dressing is a mental disorder technically?
Well, it's transvestite is listed in the APA manual as a mental disorder. Cross-dressing was just kind of a slang term that I remember was used even when I was young, type thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's another term I'm trying to remember: paraphernalia.
Oh, yes, there's autogenophilia. Which Greek, it means self and then love. That's for the men who become sexually aroused when they wear feminine clothing or act feminine, and other people perceive them as feminine. And it is a theory of many that most of the men who say that they're transsexual or now transgender because they have autogenophilia. And this was researched by Blanchard a lot in I think it was the 1950s. And it all has to do with sex. And people say, well, men compared to women, a big part of their lives is sex. And to say that it's not is just silly. It's just silly.
Very interesting. But don't they get, like the APA, don't they get attacked for for having for even mentioning like transvestite as a term or claiming that it's a medical
it's been in there for so long, but they are weeding it out now. There are a lot of, even in your average dictionary or medical journals or this or that, they're not using those words anymore. They're using transgender. And there are actually people who used to be cross-dressers back in 50 years ago and who knew they were men and they just like to wear dresses and other people see them in dresses. They knew they were men. Well, now they're going back, and when they talk about these men, they're changing their personal pronouns to female, even though those men never considered themselves female.
Yeah.
So that's how strong this whole movement is, that they're literally changing history. They're trying to get rid of certain things, which is now they have the diagnosis is just new, gender incongruence. And pretty soon, transsexualism and transvestite are going to be not be able to be found. Yeah.
Do we know to explain the mental health component of it? Like maybe what leads someone to have these feelings or these thoughts?
Well, as we talked about, a huge component is social contagion.
At that young, vulnerable age.
Yes. And a component is, to be popular when a girl hasn't been because she's a tomboy.
But someone again, the quote unquote, the cross-dressing, the transgenderism. So it's let's say, assuming it is associated to some mental health disorder for some people. So is it my question is it genetic? Like you said, that a lot of them are you're more vulnerable genetically to being put in that position?
My understanding is no. Just like if you have a person who's gay, it's not a genetic component, it's an anomaly, whether it's a female lesbian or a male gay. And there are some medical reasons as to why that can happen, which we won't go into all that detail. But
we won't.
But there have always been from Greek times transsexual men.
Yeah.
Now they didn't have surgery back then. Okay, they didn't offer it, and female hormones weren't offered till like the 1950s.
Yeah,
but they had transgenderism back then. Now a lot of them, about Greek history, they were the young Greek boys who they dressed up in female clothing and basically raped them. But yeah, it's been around for as long as history probably has been here, modern history.
So Mama and Papa Bears, what's your goal with that? Are you
to educate people, to educate and to actually show people that you can talk about. And I do want to mention one thing really quick, is that 80% of people who believe that they're transgender were abused in one form or another when they were young, sexually, verbally, emotionally. There's a history of abuse. So the first thing, red flag, you think, well, does that have anything to do with the fact that they see their body as a male, but they honestly believe that they're a woman? The second thing is a lot of girls now that are confused as to whether they're a boy or a girl, they have a comorbidity mental illness, especially autism, but they may also suffer from anxiety or depression. So again, those are factors that make a person more vulnerable to getting infected by the social contagion. But what was the question you asked? I just wanted to fit that in. I'm sorry.
I forgot, but it was about it was about Mama and Papa Bears.
Oh, yes. Yes, so it's to educate and to also to show the people who first rebelled against this were the lesbian community, because they were the ones who were initially most adversely affected by it. But they're not a very strong group. But they were, starting to put biological men in women's prisons. Well, people don't really say anything about caring about prisons. Yep. Lesbians were getting raped by men who claim to be transgender, who say, I'm a woman, I want to have sex with you. It doesn't matter that you want to go with the biological woman because I'm a real woman. So the lesbian community and then women came on board too. We've been fighting for decades, for decades, but men have just been kind of sitting in the guidelines because it's a very hot topic and men are always getting in trouble if they say anything. So they've kind of let the woman do all the work. And it should not be that way. This should be a
unity behind it. Yeah.
Yes, because it's affecting men too. It's affecting their girlfriends that go into a restroom and a man is there with his male genitalia. It's affecting his daughter that goes out to play a sport and she gets crushed by a biological male, or she loses her place or her trophy. And, I'm sure the viewers have heard about all of that with Riley Gaines and so forth.
So a group of people now, again, because of the last 100 years, thousands of years, now in the US, we have an X percentage of people that are transgender. So how do we deal with that? Because it exists. And the influence will exist because the numbers exist now. Like the problem is here, the quote unquote problem is here.
It's going to be extremely difficult.
Is it with us to stay for a while, you think?
Pardon me?
Is it with us to stay for a while?
No, for a while, perhaps forever. I can't imagine it because it's just, it's causing so much harm.
I do see though, like in certain countries, like in England, I think in certain areas, they banned surgery until certain ages.
What's interesting is that a lot of the countries such as England and a lot of Scandinavian countries who got into the transgenderism before the USA did, now they're saying, we're having problems with this. We're having a lot of girls who think that they're transgender, who are having bilateral mastectomies, starting testosterone, and then all the adverse effects of a female body taking the high dosages of testosterone. A female body isn't made for that. It isn't made for that. And then the number of people that are transitioning, and I use that in quote too, because they never really changed their sex. You cannot change your sex, but they are now recognizing, I am a female, I always have been a female. So that's why some of those countries that were early in, backing it have now backed up. I think it's called Tavistock, which was the primary gender-affirming clinic in England, closed.
I see. Very interesting. So again, so I don't think it's, at least in the US, it seems mainstream media is still very, politically correct about all this and very supportive of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But there definitely seems like your voice, it's maybe not mainstream. And again, everything that I'm saying it's all curated algorithmically for me based on what I'm exposed to on TV, on social media, etc. I was going to say, but it does seem to me, at least as of recently, the last couple of years, that there's definitely a strong voice, a strong rational voice, because I try and exclude any irrationality from both sides. But there's strong rational voices echoing what you're saying here, echoing the fact that, again, no one wants to get rid of these people or kill them, or you just want to help kids manage their lives correctly.
Right. And also because females with the transgenderism, females have lost a lot of rights. We've lost a lot of rights in terms of privacy in restrooms, locker rooms. We've lost a lot in terms of sports. And women in prison, when they're sending the biological men, they're being raped and they're getting pregnant. And when they have a court hearing, the woman, when they testify, now this is only in certain states, which is very important to say, like Florida is a very rational, biological sex rational state, but California, New York, Illinois, it definitely varies state by state, that when the women are raped, they have to refer to their rapist as she or her. And the rapist, she or her, raped her with a female penis. That's insane.
Yeah, that's why. That's why you would want to think common sense wise that at least what it is now can't stick forever, because it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And whoever, even people that think it makes sense or act as if it makes sense, again, are just being politically correct about it.
They're afraid to talk.
No one's talking.
Yeah.
Everyone's agreeing and stepping away. No one's talking about it, really.
There are so many people that when I talk to them one-on-one, they completely agree. But even on my Facebook page, when I post something, and my hometown is in Maryland, which is Democrat, which is pro-transgender, they're afraid to like my post, even though personally they agree. No, if a man wears a dress, then he's wearing a dress. He's not a woman.
Yeah.
And what I say is, how does a man even think that he's a woman? He thinks he understands what a woman is because his friends talk about it and blah. But how can he know?
And vice versa.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
How can a man know what it feels like to be a woman? He can just hear about it secondhand.
Yeah.
He has XY sex chromosomes. That's the criteria. And I'm sorry, it sounds so scientific and black and white, but now there are a very small percentage of people that have XXY sex chromosomes, but they present as men. They have some females who have only one X sex chromosome as opposed to two. They have some females that have three, but they are still more men or more woman. And I've actually had patients who have had some of these sex chromosome disorders.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And the main thing that hurts me in my gut is when kids are involved. Again, because I can see how confusing and difficult it can be for a kid. And then the parents are involved. But if we can put it in, let's say if we can say that kids were not involved in this, kids were safe from this thing that's going on, and it's just something that 18-year-olds and above face, are exposed to, and can decide how to call themselves and what surgeries to get and what hormones to inject into themselves. What would you feel about it then?
Well, think about number one, the legal drinking age is 21.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's say 21.
It's not 18.
Yeah. So let's say 21.
Okay. And then, the brain doesn't.
Because anyone can get plastic surgery, no?
Right.
When you're 18.
And if they wish to call it plastic surgery, I agree. It's cosmetic, optional plastic surgery. Yeah. It's not, in my view, and in the views of many, what I'll say, sane, rational people, it's not required surgery. Yeah.
And sorry if I'm challenging you with this question.
No, I don't mind at all.
Of course, we can even skip it. But someone who was born a few years ago, went to school now in Maryland, and they, for whatever reason, attention, abuse, whatever it is, were shoved down this route because they liked wearing boys' clothes, or because they liked putting on their sister's t-shirt their pink t-shirt when they went to school. So now they're boxed. Their teachers talk to them about these things. They're talking, and now they're an 18-year-old. 18 years later, they're an 18-year-old adult going to college, going to work, who truly does believe that they are a woman or a man, but nothing to do with really them, let's say, but just because all this pressure the last 18 years, it's completely celebrated, it's completely normal, it's encouraged, the political system in our state supports it, your parents are supporting it, your doctor's supporting it, your counselor's supporting it, your psychologist is supporting it, TV shows that you watch support it, movies support it, YouTube supports it, everyone supports it. So what do you say to that person who's 18, 25, and again, we can skip the question if you want, because they're in this situation whether they like it or not, right? Their whole childhood was based around this. So they're here now. So what do we do with those people? What do we do with them? What do they do with themselves moving forward?
Number one, they should ask the question, were they ever abused as a child? Because if they were, it's a very high risk factor that's one of the reasons why they don't realize the sex that they are, because they were abused. Secondly, if a person has been reared with that and the social, et cetera, all what you just mentioned, it is going to take a very brave person to say, no, I'm not a boy.
Almost impossible.
Well, there are more and more women, and part of the issue is that they have damaged bodies now. The girls will never be able to breastfeed. They don't have breasts.
Yeah, guys can't have babies. Yeah.
Right, yeah. So I have a lot of empathy, a lot of empathy for them. And plus they're also thrown out of the transgender popular community. And sometimes they're treated very poorly by them. I have a friend whose daughter recognized that she was not a boy after all, and she's been ostracized. Yeah.
With Mama and Papa Bears, do you connect with other parents?
Yes.
That share their voices and concerns, and do you feel like people that speak with you, are they going through these challenges themselves with their families?
Some are. Some are, and some actually reach out to say, my daughter is thinking that she's a boy, so this is what I've done. Does it sound right? And I'm no expert, but I can speak as a mother who had a tomboy daughter.
Yeah.
And having that daughter, I know she would have been pressured to think that she was a boy, and she's a happy lesbian now. Yeah. And they're the pre-lesbians that I call them, tomboys, they're at very high risk to be recruited. But yeah, sometimes I'll have a parent reach out to me.
You use the word recruited.
Yeah, well, because it's number one money making. I mean, there's millions and millions of dollars at gender-affirming clinics, drugs and surgeries.
Is insurance then involved?
Yes.
In this loop?
Well, but there was the hearing here in Florida as to whether or not Florida Medicaid should pay for gender-affirming care, and it was voted no. There was Chloe Coleman, who was a very well-known young woman who thought she was a boy and had all surgery and so forth. And she came down to testify. But it varies state to state.
I watched this also Netflix documentary. I forget the name of the documentary, but it's by a guy named Matt Walsh.
Oh, yeah.
Who's very vocal about these things.
Very vocal. Yeah.
And the documentary was literally a series of interviews with individuals who have transitioned. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is.
Heartbreaking stuff.
Yeah.
But as I was saying before, it seems like there's a lot more of a rational discussion now, even if not mainstream. We have all these podcast platforms, all these different ways for people to express themselves.
Right. And also women are able to speak more freely about it, even in more liberal states. For example, in November 2022 was a Let's Speak Woman, like a demonstration, and they had trans activists literally try and run over the woman, and they had to have the SWAT team called in, and it really made the transgender community look bad. And I think that from higher management said, we've got to tone some of that back because we're actually helping the woman because
it's a small community, but it's a loud community.
Well, it's actually the activists they're the ones that are loudest. They're the ones that there's a much greater number of. Obviously, a much greater
which are
number.
Not necessarily transgenders.
Oh, absolutely, they aren't. Whether it's the parents, the moms. There's a lot of moms who are activists for their children. Moms love their children. If you can get mothers, you can get the husbands. You can get a lot. So they were very clever bringing in girls, because when you bring girls, you get to bring in the mother, the father, the siblings. You have brothers that think that they're girls. They have the sister. Their sister thinks that she's a boy.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
It's just bizarre. It's
But how big are we numbers-wise in the US?
In terms of
people that identify as transgender. And the first I came to America roughly 10 years ago for the first time to live in college, and I had to fill out the NCAA form of personal information. And the NCAA have been very controversial over this whole thing. Again, controversial disagreeing with you maybe because they have these like the famous I forget his or her name who was at UPenn, the swimmer who won the national championship in women's swimming,
right,
who was a male before and then transitioned. So the NCAA, I had to fill out this form, and I clicked on gender, and I had like 12 options. It was just, for me, luckily, it was an easy one to pick, but it was also the first time in my life that I filled out a form that did not give me 2 options.
Right.
It gave me 12 options.
Yeah.
And I still have that saved and favorited on my phone because it was like, until that moment, it's only something transgender and all that stuff. It's only something I've heard about, maybe a reference in a stand-up comedy show or a movie. But that kind of made it real. And from there, I just kept being more and more exposed to it. Also being in a modern university, a big university. It was leaning towards one direction pretty much only. But I do think that seems to me there's more rationality in terms of conversation when it comes to it. But I do think it's important, like the stuff that you're mentioning. And again, I don't think we said anything bad. We're not hoping.
What I said was I could be crucified for. If I went to a liberal state,
I know
I could be attacked.
You will be attacked.
Yeah.
Also, someone listening to this will get defensive from the first minute, and probably
I'll get hate mail.
Probably
Fine.
just stop listening. Probably stop listening. But I'm saying, but on paper, nothing that you said is bad. You're questioning, maybe criticizing certain processes,
which is the freedom of speech.
We're
in America.
No, because you do hear people who maybe share your position or bits of your position, who maybe are too frantic, who are too aggressive, which is very easy to neglect those voices. And then those people complain that they don't have the freedom of speech, which I'm not saying that those people should be blocked out of conversation, but it's refreshing hearing someone present those arguments in a calm,
just rational.
collected, rational way that encourages discussion. So I hope anyone that listened to this, me including, will learn more about it from the different angles that you mentioned, and hopefully it's something that we can together in unity, men and women, navigate as we move forward. What are you going to do about your back?
Oh, no, I have a lap swim pool, so I swim every day. That's the best physical therapy for me.
Yeah.
And I've stopped my heavy manual labor yard work.
Yeah.
I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I don't have the muscular strength, the bone structure, the skeletal structure that a man has.
Yeah.
I never will.
Yeah. So you swim. I did, I think, read on your website that you do or used to teach aerobic dancing.
Oh, that was when I was 20.
Yeah.
Yeah, very early on.
Not on your
Recent
current resume.
No. That was no. The pay difference between teaching aerobic dance and being a physical therapist. No comparison.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you born in Florida? Are you from Florida originally?
I was. My parents came here when my mom was pregnant. They went back to Maryland. I was born. They moved back to Florida. I'm a Floridian.
Yeah.
I'm 100% Floridian.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do want to mention one thing, though. Okay. I wasn't aware of this whole transgenderism until November 2022. And it's because I was dialoguing with a man who was gay, and he was pro-transgender. You've probably heard of the LGBT. Well, a lot of LGB don't like the T because LGB is sexual orientation. Transgender is confusion about one's sex.
Yeah.
Totally different. But those wealthy, clever men attached T to LGB to get society more on board. Very clever. They're very clever men.
No, I even saw because now it's LGBTQ plus
I plus. And
so, we spoke about the men, women in Texas back then in 1994. But even now, recently, and a couple of months ago, Elon Musk, the owner of Twitter, X, tweeted, who decides when and what letter is added? So now they have the plus.
Well, that actually varies, and you kind of have a fad that catches on, and then that
but
fad
it sticks, no? Because the letters that are added are there to stay.
Oh, I'm sorry. By fad, I mean what becomes popular in one area of the country, let's say, or amongst a certain group of people or this transgender group, and then the fad becomes correct, permanently attached to it. But now LGB communities are starting their own separate groups because people who are pro-transgender infiltrated the LGB groups, changed them to LGBT, and the LGBT has lost a lot of their voice, lesbians especially, the females.
So you said until 2022?
Yes, 2022, I was clueless. I was raising a daughter. I was a physical therapist, making ends meet, you know. And then in 2022, when it was on Facebook, and someone called me a TERF. TERF. I said, I don't know what TERF means, so I looked it up. Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist. And I said, you're right, I am a TERF.
Yeah.
So I wrote back to the fella, and I thanked him very much because I had no idea how bad it was. And when I first got into it, I hooked up with a lot of other TERFs. And then I realized, why are women fighting this battle alone? This is insane. Men should be standing up to protect women and men. I'm sorry. Men should have been the first line of defense. That's a man's job, protect women and children.
Yeah.
They let it through. Women started having to fight back. Now I'm calling men in.
Really interesting. So it's been an exciting year or two for you in terms of education.
Just over a year. It's incredible.
Amazing.
How much I've learned and started to share with other people. And I've done some demonstrations down here in St. Augustine. I was almost attacked once. Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah. But it's like, you have
Yeah.
to do what you have to do.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you mind mentioning the name of your book for anyone to find who's listening, and your website or anywhere else where people can find you? But it's been almost, I think, an hour and a half. So
Okay. I didn't think we'd have so much to talk about.
I know. So hopefully we can do a part 2 in the future. Hopefully I find my way back to St. Augustine. Definitely do like it here. So please, tell us.
Okay. The title of my book is Wellness and Holistic Physical Therapy, 3rd edition. It's self-published. So if you visit my website, wellnesssociety.org, .org, because we're nonprofit. Com means profit, org means nonprofit. So wellnesssociety.org. There's, you can order the textbook directly from the site. I give a lot of free information about the whole food plant-based diet, mental stigma, a couple other areas. And then there's also a page for mama and papa bears.
Fantastic. So it was a great conversation. Really, I learned a lot. And hopefully this leads me down an avenue where I'll learn even more about this stuff. So thank you, Dr. Sharon Fair.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a great time.
Me too.
If you liked this video and you want to see more, make sure to subscribe below and don't forget to hit the notification button.